What would you do if you woke up from a coma and heard your own son planning where to dump your wife after you die? How do you stay calm when you realize your child sees you as a wallet and your wife as a burden? This is how I listened with my eyes closed, walked out of that hospital quietly, and let my son meet the consequences of underestimating me. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name is Victor Hale, and when I finally woke up from the coma, the first thing I felt was weight, not pain. My body was heavy, my tongue was dry, and my eyelids might as well have been welded shut. I did not try to open them. I lay there and did what I had done my whole working life as a civil engineer. I observed first, acted later. I listened to the room the way I used to listen to a bridge under stress, waiting to hear where it might crack. The room spoke in machines at first. Monitors beeped in slow rhythm, air moved through tubes, plastic rustled whenever someone shifted near my bed. Then a calm male voice cut through it all, steady and trained. It was the doctor. He explained my condition in that careful way they use when they are afraid to break a family in one sentence. He said my body was stable. He said there were signs of reaction. He said the next days would show how much function my brain might give back. He spoke about risk and hope like two sides of the same coin. Near my left side, I heard another sound, small and uneven. Maria. My wife has a very specific way of breathing when she is trying not to cry. It becomes shallow and louder at the same time. I did not need my eyes to picture her. I saw her in my mind, shoulders slightly forward, fingers laced together, eyes fixed on the doctor's mouth as if every syllable were medicine. For a moment the thought that she was still here, right next to me, made me want to fight my eyelids and call her name. Then another voice joined them, and the urge vanished like a light switched off. My son, Alex, spoke with the tone he uses when he wants to sound important and in control. His voice was flat, professional, almost like a manager on a conference call. He did not ask if I was in pain. He did not ask if I had opened my eyes. He asked about timelines and costs. He wanted to know how long my recovery might take, what level of care I might need, and what exactly that care would cost. He pushed for numbers. Days, months, percentages. The doctor tried to stay general, talked about ranges, about how each case was unique, but Alex pressed until the man finally described the worst case, the one doctors normally keep for last. When the doctor said that if my brain did not recover enough, I might need long-term support, maybe even permanent help with basic tasks, the room went very quiet. I felt my heart rate climb. The monitor told on me with faster beeps. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to stay still. I knew that the second I opened my eyes, everyone would shift into performance mode. They would shape their words for me, not for each other. Right then, I did not want comfort. I wanted the raw truth of how they spoke when they believed I was far away. So I lay motionless, an old man inside his own body, listening. After some time, the doctor left. The door closed softly, like a period at the end of a sentence. The hallway noise dimmed, and the machines went back to being the loudest voices in the room. Maria moved closer. I felt the small change of weight near my arm, then the warm touch of her hand on my wrist. Her skin felt dry, tired. She whispered something I could not hear clearly, probably a short prayer she had said 100 times over the last weeks. Her thumb traced a slow circle on my skin, the same way she used to do when I came home exhausted from night shifts years ago. Then Alex started talking again. At first his words sounded like a good son stepping up. He said that things would be hard and that he was ready to help. He spoke about schedules and visits and making sure everything was organized. It almost sounded like support. But very quickly, the center of his sentences shifted. He began to talk about how expensive hospital days were, how long my treatment could drag on, how his own life could not simply stop because of this. He listed his job, his mortgage, Lily's school, the cost of living, Julia's stress. He stacked these points like forms on a desk. He moved from facts to conclusions in one smooth line. He said that they had to be realistic and practical. He told Maria that if I did not recover strongly, it might be better to move me to a facility where trained staff could handle cases like mine. He described this as a responsible decision. He said she would not have to lift me or watch me every second. He called it something for everyone's good. He spoke about my life as if it were a project to be managed, not a person who had once carried him on his shoulders through crowded streets. Maria tried to push back. Her voice sounded small and hoarse. She said she wanted me at home if possible, that we had always managed together, that she could take care of me. Alex did not raise his voice, but his tone sharpened. He reminded her of her age, of her back pain, of the nights she already woke up to check on me even before the coma. He told her that love alone was not enough. He said they had to make decisions like adults. On the surface, his words were covered with concern. Underneath, I heard something colder, impatience or pressure, a need to control the situation in a way that made his own life easier. Then he stepped over a line I had not even known he was standing on. He started talking about what would happen when I died. Not if, when. He spoke about it the way he would talk about the end of a project. He said that when that day came, they would have to decide what to do with the house and what to do with Maria. He brought up a nursing home again, this time for her. He said she would be safe there, with meals and medicine and nurses. He said she would not be alone. He did not finish the next thought, but I did it for him. She would also not be in his way. I lay there, breathing through tubes, and felt something inside me tighten. Part of me wanted to tear everything off, to sit up, to ask him since when his parents had turned into problems to be stored somewhere. But another part, the one that had survived years of deadlines and weak foundations and weather, told me to stay still. For years I had given Alex the benefit of every doubt because he was my only child. Now, for the first time, I wanted to know exactly how he spoke when he believed I could not hear him. He began to talk about the house in a tone that made my chest hurt in a new way. He spoke as if it were already his. He said that once everything was in order, he could manage the bills and decisions for us. He talked about simplifying property, putting things in one place, taking over so that Maria would not have to worry. He hinted that selling might be smart. He used phrases like sign things over, handle the paperwork. Each phrase landed in my mind like a small stone. Maria tried again to defend our home. She said that the house was our life, our memories, the place we had built from nothing. He sighed, the same long, annoyed sigh I had heard since he was a teenager, and told her that reality did not care about feelings, only about documents. As he spoke, an older scene rose in my mind, clear despite the fog in my head. Our kitchen, months earlier, the radio playing some old love song, the smell of onions and garlic in the pan, Maria moving between stove and sink, humming under her breath. I was at the table with a stack of papers spread out in front of me, pension statements, bank letters, and the house deed with my name on it. I had checked everything that night and told her we were not rich, but we were safe. I had said that careful saving and simple living meant that even if something happened to me, she would not be thrown into the street. I had carried that quiet plan in my head for years, thinking I was protecting her. Later, Alex had stopped by with Lily. He had talked about his promotion, his long hours, the cost of city life. At one point, he had joked that one day we should just sign everything over to him and let him optimize it, since he worked in finance and knew how to make money grow. We had laughed. I had treated it as harmless. Maria's smile had been thin, but I had not asked why. While we talked, Lily had run in circles around the table, waving a wooden spoon like a plane. I had watched her and thought that everything I owned would one day be for her comfort. I had not imagined that her father would look at the same things and see something to control. The memory faded, and I came back to the hospital bed. Maria's fingers still rested stubbornly on my skin, as if she could hold me here by touch alone. After a while, Alex said he had to take a call. I heard the soft rustle of his coat and the click of the door. The room shrank back down to Maria, me, and the machines. Her quiet sobs started again, the ones she probably thought I could not hear. I lay in the dark behind my eyelids and counted each beep on the monitor to keep my anger from breaking through my weak body. Later in the night, when the lights were low and the corridor sounds were softer, the nurse came in. I had heard her before, but I did not know her name then. Her footsteps were light, steady, never rushed. She checked the monitors, adjusted a line, smoothed the blanket near my shoulder. Then she stood still for a moment. She spoke in a low voice to the air, or maybe to me. She said that families often changed when illness came. She said fear made some people cold and practical, and others cling to hope. She said my wife barely left the room, that she looked very tired but very determined. She said my son seemed very focused on practical matters. She added that she hoped I had people who saw me as more than a case and a bill. Her words settled inside me like small, heavy truths. A stranger had seen in a few days what I had refused to see for years. When she left, I lay there and thought about every time I had said yes to Alex without asking questions. Every time I had stepped back to keep the peace. Every time I had believed that patience alone could teach respect. The machines hummed and clicked around me like quiet witnesses. Sometime before dawn, I heard the door open again. Lighter hallway noise slipped in, then was cut off as the door closed. Alex's footsteps crossed the floor, then stopped near the entrance. He did not come all the way to my bed this time. I heard him take out his phone. His voice was low but clear. He told Julia that the doctor said there was a chance I might recover and also a chance I might not. He said they needed to be ready for both. Then his voice dropped even lower, but the words were sharp in the quiet room. He said that once the house was finally in their name, all decisions about my care and about Maria would be easier, that everything in their life would be simpler to manage when that was done. I stayed under the thin hospital blanket, eyes closed, muscles weak, listening to my own son plan our futures as if we were items on a list. The word there echoed in my mind, steady and loud, as if someone had hit a steel beam with a hammer. In that moment, still half paralyzed and hidden behind my own eyelids, something inside me stopped bending. If I ever walked out of that hospital, I knew I would not go back to being a quiet signature at the bottom of Alex's plans. Lying there in that bed, pretending to sleep, I started to move backwards in my mind, step by step, like I was walking through an old job site and checking every beam I had installed. The moment in the ICU, with Alex talking about nursing homes and property as if my body were already cold, was not a single crack. It was only the loudest one. There had been hairline cracks for years, small, easy to ignore, hidden under fresh paint and good intentions. Now, with my eyes closed and no one asking me to answer, I had time to follow them from the start and see where I had helped them form. When Alex was a boy, respect felt simple. He looked at me like I knew everything. I was the one who could fix his toys, carry him on my shoulders, build him a treehouse in the backyard after long days at the construction sites. I did not come from money. I came from hard hats, dust, and careful measurements. I gave him what I never had: a calm home, a mother who was always there, food on the table without questions. I worked overtime and night shifts when he was small. Maria managed the house on a tight budget and still somehow made birthdays feel big. Back then, Alex used to brag at school that his dad built bridges. He used to say that when the city trusted someone with concrete and steel, that person must be important. Then time moved, as it always does. Bridges became office buildings, then office buildings became retirement plans. I stepped into more planning and less physical work. My back hurt more, my hair went gray. Alex grew taller and sharper. He went from asking me how things worked to telling me how things now worked. He discovered finance and numbers on screens instead of beams on plans. At first, I was proud. My son in an office, clean hands, good salary. I told everyone on my crew that he would never have to break his back for money. I thought that was the greatest gift a father could give. We helped him with everything we could. When he finished university, he had some loans, but not as many as most of his friends, because I had pushed every spare coin into his tuition and books. When he got his first job, he moved into a small rental and complained about the cost. I quietly sent money when he was short and never called it a loan. When he wanted to buy the townhouse with Julia, we drained a large part of our savings for the down payment and told him it was our way of setting him up. Maria and I talked late into the night about whether it was too much, but I always said the same thing. I said that a father's job was to build a solid base, and the child's job was to build upwards. I assumed, without even thinking, that he would remember that base with gratitude. When Alex brought Julia home for the first time, I tried to see her through his eyes. She was pretty, put together, always checking her phone, always aware of how she looked from the outside. She said the house felt cozy, but her eyes moved over the old cabinets and worn table like she was walking through a thrift store. She worked in social media, something I did not really understand, but she spoke about followers and brand deals and networking like they were oxygen. She said that Alex had so much potential that he only needed the right image and environment. Maria liked that Julia was polite, at least on the surface. I noticed small things, like the way she flinched at the worn patches on the sofa or the old curtains, but I pushed those things aside. Young people like new things, I told myself. I worked all my life so my son would not have to live like I did. Then Lily was born, and for a while everything looked simple again. We became the grandparents who always said yes. Maria watched Lily whenever Julia needed to work or rest. She sang to her, fed her, cleaned up toys from the floor with a smile, even when her knees ached. I built a small wooden rocking horse, even though my hands shook more than before, and when Lily climbed on it, my heart felt full in a way that had nothing to do with money. Alex said we were a big help. He said we were saving them a fortune in childcare. He laughed when he said it, and I laughed with him, because I wanted to hear the gratitude and not the calculation hiding inside the words. As the years went by, their visits changed shape. At first, they stayed for dinner, asked about our week, brought us small gifts from trips. Later, they mainly came to drop Lily off and pick her up. They arrived in a hurry and left in a hurry. They talked more about problems with interest rates and taxes than about how we were doing. If I mentioned my blood pressure or Maria's back, Alex would nod and say we should not worry, that he would take care of things when needed. Julia would remind Maria how lucky Lily was to have grandparents who were still alive and able. The words sounded kind, but there was always a layer of expectation under them, like a note in a contract that most people do not read. One afternoon, before my health really started to slide, Alex invited us to his townhouse for my birthday. It was stylish and modern, with white walls and clean lines, the kind of place you see in magazines. Julia had set the table with matching plates and candles. Everything looked perfect for photos. They served expensive cheese and wine. Their friends stopped by early to say hello, all of them talking about conferences, projects, followers, and property values. In the middle of the evening, Alex started explaining his job to me. He talked about complex portfolios, about risk management, about how old ways of handling money were no longer efficient. He said that people who did not understand modern finance needed help from professionals who did. He said it lightly, almost like a joke, but I felt the distance in his voice. I was no longer the one who knew things. I was the one who did not get it. Later that night, after everyone left, he pulled me aside to the balcony. The city lights were spread out below us. He talked about future plans. He said that as we got older, it would be smarter to move everything into simpler structures. He used words like consolidate and streamline. He said that one day, to avoid complications and legal problems, it might be easier if he handled the deeds and accounts. He said that he could take care of the paperwork and decisions so that Maria and I could relax. He framed it as a gift. He spoke as if he was offering to carry our worries. I looked at him, at the man he had become, and thought my son was simply trying to be responsible. I did not see that he was already positioning himself as the owner of our lives. A few months before the coma, we met at a small cafe near the hospital for lunch. I had started feeling more tired, breathless on the stairs, numbness in my fingers sometimes. Maria worried and booked appointments. Alex said it was normal for my age. He arrived at the cafe in a crisp shirt, phone buzzing every few minutes. He barely looked at the menu before ordering something healthy and quick. He spent half the time talking about a new project at work and how much stress he was under. Then he steered the talk back to us. He asked if we had updated our wills and medical directives. He said that if something sudden happened, it would be easier if he had full authority to manage things without delays. He presented it as being ready for emergencies, like fire insurance. Maria listened with wide eyes. I could feel her fear rising in every slow breath. I tried to calm her. I said that it might be wise for Alex to help with some papers later, but I did not give any concrete answer. Alex did not push too hard that day. He just repeated that he was ready to step in, that he was busy but capable, that we were lucky to have a son who understood systems. He said that many people his age would avoid caring for older parents. He made sure we knew that he was not selfish, that he was willing to take on this heavy role. At the time, I heard commitment. Now, lying in that hospital bed, I heard ambition. That afternoon, when we left the cafe, he walked a few steps ahead of us, checking his phone. Maria slipped her hand into mine. I remember her whispering that she was scared of becoming a weight on his shoulders. I remember saying that he loved us, that he would always do what was right. I believed it, because the alternative was too painful to accept. I did not want to admit that my son might see us as tasks instead of people. In the years between that cafe meeting and the coma, small signs kept appearing. Alex would make comments about how many hours he lost driving across town to help us with small things. Julia would complain about missed weekends and how her friends had parents who paid for everything and never asked for anything back. When I mentioned that one of my old colleagues had moved to a smaller place and kept full control of his assets, Alex shook his head and said that man was being stubborn and would cause legal trouble for his family. He said my colleague should just accept that the next generation had better tools and knowledge. Slowly, sentence by sentence, he moved the idea of control from us to him. Slowly, without ever saying it directly, he made it sound like good children took over and good parents stepped aside. Now, in the ICU, with my eyes closed and my body weak, those pieces lined up inside my mind like a long row of beams, finally showing their full weight. I saw the pattern in every decision I had made as a father. I had always tried to make things smooth for him. No heavy conversations, no guilt, no pressure. When he was rude as a teenager, I told myself he would grow out of it. When he was demanding as a young adult, I told myself he was stressed. When he made jokes about us being old-fashioned, I laughed and did not correct him. I thought patience and love could fix everything. I never once sat him down and drew a clear line between help and ownership. At some point that second day after I woke up, but kept pretending, I heard voices in the corridor again. Maria's voice was soft and tired. Alex's voice was low but firm. They stood just outside my door. He was telling her that the doctor had been honest, that my future was uncertain, that they needed to be realistic. He reminded her of the cost of my stay, of the possible months of therapy, of how this could affect his own job and Julia's work if they had to be more involved. He said he could not split himself in half. He said he had his own family to think about. He said that if I did not recover enough, they would have to move fast with decisions so that expenses would not eat everything. I could not see Maria's face, but I could hear the defeat in her silence. The machines next to me recorded every small change in my heart and breathing, but the monitor could not show the way my view of my son shifted with each one of his cool, practical sentences. It was in that remembering and rehearing, there in the dark behind my eyelids, that a sentence from the balcony came back to me, sharp and clear. Alex had once said he would take care of the paperwork and decisions. I had thought it was an offer. Now, with the sound of his voice floating through the hospital corridor, I finally understood it as a warning. The third morning after I woke up but kept my eyes closed, I felt something strange. It was small, almost nothing, like a single grain of sand in a machine. My right hand moved. Not much, not like in movies where people sit up and tear out tubes. It was a tiny twitch in my fingers, a slow, clumsy curl, but it was mine. It felt like a message from my body to my mind, a quiet reminder that I was not only a patient lying there, I was still a person who could choose. I lay very still and tested again, counted in my head, tried to move one finger at a time. The monitor showed my heart rate rising. I forced myself to breathe slower so no one would rush in and change the moment. Later that day, when the doctor came in, he spoke in his careful voice again. This time he sounded almost hopeful. He said to Maria that there were signs of improvement. He said that my responses were better, that my muscles were beginning to listen to my brain again. He talked about therapy, about exercises, about patience. Alex asked questions about how long things would take and how much they would cost. I listened to both men as if I were listening to two different languages. One spoke about my life, the other spoke about my price. When they left, Nurse Elena stayed behind. I had decided the night before that if someone in this building might help me without twisting my words, it would be her. She had a way of moving around the bed that felt like respect. She did not talk to me like a piece of furniture, and she did not talk over me like I was already gone. As she adjusted the drip, I let my hand twitch again, just a little bit more than before. She noticed. Her breath caught for a second. She leaned closer and asked softly if I could hear her. I let my fingers curl again, this time more clearly. I took a deep breath and pushed air up my throat. The sound that came out was rough and broken, not even a full word, but it was enough. Her whole posture changed. She told me that it was okay, that I did not need to rush, that my body was waking up. She went to call the doctor, but before she reached the door, I forced another sound out and tried to shape it. It hurt, like dragging words over dry gravel, but I did not stop. I tried to say that I did not want the doctor yet. I tried to say her name. It came out as a broken mess, but she turned back. Her hand rested lightly on my arm, and she told me to take my time. With that small opening, I gave up the act of being fully asleep. I opened my eyes slightly, squinting at the harsh light. The ceiling swam, then steadied. Elena's face came into focus. She smiled in a way that was not professional but human. She told me that it was good I was back. She asked if I was in pain. I shook my head a little, then stopped when the room spun. When I could, I moved my lips carefully and said that I could hear everything before. The words were quiet and slow, but clear enough. Her eyes widened. She understood what that meant, even if she did not know the details yet. I did not tell her right away what I had heard from Alex. There would be time for that. Instead, I asked for something that, to her, probably sounded simple and harmless. I asked if she could bring me my phone when she had a moment, and I asked her to tell Maria only that I was awake and a little tired. I said that I needed a bit of time before seeing everyone. Even in my broken voice, the word everyone carried weight. Elena hesitated for a second, then nodded. She said she would bring the phone when things were quiet on the floor, that she understood people needed privacy after such a shock. When she left, I closed my eyes again, but not to hide this time. I closed them to remember more clearly. My mind went to my garage at home, the place where I kept my tools and my past. For Maria, the garage was just a dusty place with boxes and old metal shelves. For me, it was also a vault. In one corner stood a gray metal cabinet with a stiff door that always needed an extra pull. Inside, I kept more than nails and broken parts. I kept copies of every important paper I had ever signed, house deeds, pension documents, tax letters, old contract summaries from my last years on big projects. I had always kept them there because I did not fully trust digital records and because I had seen enough companies lose files to system errors. Most people in my life saw the cabinet as clutter. Alex had once teased me about it. He had stood in the doorway of the garage and told me that no one kept physical files anymore. He had waved his phone in the air and said that everything important lived in the cloud. He had joked that if anything happened to me, they would probably have to rent a truck just to carry my paper nonsense to the dump. I had laughed then, tapping the cabinet with my fist, saying it kept me calm to have things where I could touch them. In that memory, I did not see his eyes. Now, lying in the hospital, I replayed the scene and saw the calculation there. He had not asked once what was in those folders. He had assumed that anything important would eventually pass through his hands. In that metal cabinet there were also names. One of them was Samuel Price. We had met years earlier, not as client and lawyer, but as two tired men stuck at the same dull charity event. He was the one person there who did not speak to me like I was beneath him because I had dirt on my boots. He listened when I talked about engineering. I listened when he talked about the law. Later, when I needed someone to guide me through buying the house and setting up basic protections for Maria if something happened to me, I called him. He never pushed expensive schemes. He always said that simple, clear documents, correctly filed, saved more families than fancy plans. It had been a long time since I needed Samuel for anything big. Most years, our contact was a short call or email when some new rule came up and I wanted to be safe. I had never involved Alex in those talks, partly because I did not want to bother him, partly because I believed that one day, when needed, I would sit him down and explain everything calmly. I had pictured that talk many times. A kitchen table, a pile of papers, a pot of coffee, my son listening with respect. It was a picture built from hope. Reality had drawn another one now. A little later, Elena came back as promised, sliding my phone into my hand with a quick, almost conspiratorial smile. She reminded me not to overdo it, said I needed rest. I nodded. When she left, I lay there with the device in my palm for a long moment, feeling its weight. It was just metal and glass, but it was also connection. It was a bridge between the man in this bed and the man in that garage with the metal cabinet and the lawyer's card. For the first time since waking up, I felt something like control returning, very slowly, like water rising in a dry well. I unlocked the phone with clumsy fingers. The screen glared. There were messages from Maria, from friends, from distant relatives who pretended to care. There were updates from Alex, short and practical, addressed to group chats, not to me. I scrolled past all of them until I found Samuel's name. It was buried under months of silence, but it was still there. I opened a new message. Typing was hard. My hand shook. I had to correct many letters. I wrote something simple on purpose, something that could not be misunderstood if anyone else ever looked. I told him I had been very sick, that I was in the hospital, that there were important things about the house and pension I now wanted to discuss privately. I asked if we could meet when I was discharged. I pressed send and watched the small icon spin. While I waited, my mind returned to Alex. I thought about his life, the one I had helped build, the townhouse, the car, the vacations with Julia that always appeared in bright colors on her social media. I thought about how he once talked about my generation as if we were children trying to understand computers. He said people like me did not see the full picture, that we only understood simple savings, not real strategies. At the time, I had smiled and let it pass. Now I realized how dangerous that combination was. A man who thought he was the only adult in the room and believed he deserved the keys to everything. A soft chime broke my thoughts. Samuel had replied. He said he was sorry to hear about my health, that he was glad I was still here, and that of course we could talk. He suggested that when I was stronger, we should meet at his office to review everything and make sure Maria would be secure no matter what happened next. He added one last line, saying that I should not delay if I felt that people around me were already making plans that did not match my wishes. That single line told me he had seen this kind of situation before. I put the phone down for a while and stared at the white ceiling. I thought about the difference between loud power and quiet power. Alex had loud power. He had youth, job title, modern tools, friends who praised him online. I had quiet power. I had deeds, documents, old-fashioned records, and a lawyer's number handwritten on a card in a metal cabinet. I had a wife who still touched my arm like it mattered, and a long memory of every sacrifice that had brought us to this point. I understood now that quiet did not mean weak. It only meant patient. When Maria came later that afternoon and saw my open eyes, she nearly collapsed with relief. She leaned over me, crying, touching my face, talking fast. I could not answer much, but I met her gaze and held her hand with my shaky fingers. Alex came in soon after. He acted pleased, spoke about how this was good news, how we could now think about the next steps. He asked the doctor practical questions again. He talked about rehab centers and equipment. He said we all needed to be realistic, that my full independence might never return. He did not know that while he spoke, there was now a message in my phone and a meeting in my future that did not include him. I let him talk. I did not argue. I did not protest when he acted as if he were already in charge. I simply listened and learned. I watched how he placed himself between the doctor and my wife. I watched how he talked about my life as if it were a set of tasks on his calendar. Each sentence confirmed what I already knew now. The boy who once bragged proudly that his father built bridges had grown into a man who saw that same father as a problem to be managed. That night, when the lights dimmed and the noise outside my door faded, I lay awake, eyes open. For the first time, I did not feel like a trapped patient. I felt like a man standing at the start of a long, narrow hallway with one clear light at the other end. It would take time to walk there. My body would have to learn its own weight again. My mind would have to stay sharp, even through pain and pills, but the direction was set. I knew now that if I made it out of this place on my own 2 feet, even with a cane, I would not return to the life where Alex's voice decided everything. I would go home, open the metal cabinet, and remind my son and myself who actually built the base he was standing on. Leaving the hospital for the first time felt like walking out of a tunnel into a world that had moved on without me. The air outside was cold and sharp. It smelled like car fumes, rain on asphalt, and cheap coffee from the hospital kiosk. Maria stood close to me, one hand gripping the handle of the wheelchair, the other resting on my shoulder. I could walk short distances now with support, but hospital rules said I had to leave in the chair. It did not bother me. I had spent weeks lying flat. Rolling forward already felt like progress. In the parking lot, Alex walked ahead of us, keys jingling. He had chosen where to park, as if that small choice proved he was in charge of the whole day. He talked about the rehab schedule, about follow-up visits, about how busy his week was going to be with all this on top of work. He said that we needed to be organized and not make things harder than they had to be. I listened, nodding when he looked back, silent when he did not. He did not ask where I wanted to go after the hospital. He assumed the answer. He said we would drive straight home so I could rest, and then later we would talk about bigger plans. Maria helped me into the back seat. Every movement hurt, but pain was a useful teacher. It reminded me that the body I had nearly lost was still mine. As Alex drove, he spoke to Maria in the front, not to me. He said that once we knew how my rehab went, he would look into options for long-term care, just in case. He said it did not make sense to delay those searches. He mentioned again that running 2 households, ours and his, was hard. He said he was doing everything he could. I watched his face in the rearview mirror. He looked serious, tired, slightly annoyed. He looked like a man who believed he carried the world and forgot who built the road under his feet. When we reached the house, Maria helped me out with slow, careful steps. The front door felt heavier than before. The air inside smelled like dust and old soup. Time had passed here too, but the room still held our life. The couch, the framed wedding photo, the old rug with a burn mark from when Alex dropped a sparkler as a boy. For a moment, emotion hit so hard I had to sit down quickly. I looked around and saw not just walls and objects, but years of work. Night shifts, missed holidays, every nail and brush stroke carried pieces of me. Alex did a quick tour like an inspector. He pointed out the lack of handrails in the bathroom, the narrow doorway to our bedroom, the stairs to the second floor. He said it would be difficult for me to move around, maybe even unsafe. He said that was why facilities existed. He repeated that word, facilities. It was cold and smooth, like plastic. I told him in a quiet voice that I wanted to try at home first, with some changes. He said he understood, but kept explaining how my choice would make things complex for everyone. That night, after he left, Maria and I sat together at the kitchen table. The light above us was yellow and soft. She made tea and held the cup in both hands like it was the only warm thing in her life. Her eyes looked older than before my coma. She asked me in a small voice what we were going to do. I could see that she was pulled in 2 directions. On one side was our home, our history, her loyalty to me. On the other side was fear, and the loud, confident voice of our son saying he would solve everything if we just agreed. I took her hand and squeezed it gently. I told her that for now we were going to do simple, practical things. I said I needed to get stronger, that I would work hard in rehab, but that I also needed to look at our papers and finances again. I told her I wanted her to know everything this time, not just trust me blindly. She looked surprised. For years I had handled those things alone. I thought I was protecting her from worry. Now I saw that hiding details from the people you love can also be a form of weakness, even if your intent is good. The next day, when Alex was at work and Lily was at school, Maria helped me into the garage. The air was cool, with a faint smell of oil and wood dust. I leaned on my cane and took careful steps to the gray metal cabinet. It stood exactly where I had left it, stubborn and solid. Maria watched as I pulled on the door. It stuck, then opened with a scrape. Inside, folders sat in neat rows, their tabs marked in my handwriting. House, pension, bank, misc, legal. I rested my hand on them for a moment, like greeting old friends. Maria had seen this cabinet thousands of times, but it was the first time she really entered it with me. I pulled out the folder marked house and carried it to the workbench. We stood side by side, shoulder to shoulder, reading. She traced the typed lines with her finger. I pointed out our names on the deed, the dates, the signatures, the simple fact that this place belonged to us, not to Alex. I did not talk about future changes or plans. I only wanted her to feel for herself the weight of that paper. We opened the pension folder next, then bank. There were statements, letters, a handwritten note from Samuel with a list of things we had done years ago to keep things in order. Maria read slowly. Her lips moved with the words. Sometimes she stopped and looked up, asking if this meant we were safe. I answered honestly. I said we were not rich, but we were not helpless either. I said that if we used what we had in the right way, we could make sure no one could put her somewhere she did not want to be. I did not say Alex's name. I did not need to. It hung in the air between us. A few days later, when my energy allowed it, Maria and I went to the local bank branch. We did not tell Alex. We said we were going to the clinic for an extra checkup. In a way, it was true. This was a checkup of another kind. The bank smelled like air freshener and printer ink. People stood in quiet lines. We sat down with a clerk at a small desk with glass dividers. I told the clerk that I had been very sick and wanted to review our accounts, make sure everything was updated. I spoke calmly, like a man doing normal housekeeping, not like a man trying to breathe air back into his own life. The clerk pulled up our information on her screen. She confirmed balances, went over which accounts were joint, which were in my name only. I asked her to update phone numbers and addresses so that nothing important would be sent only to Alex if something changed. I asked about how transfers worked, how notices were sent, how to set up extra security. She explained everything in simple steps. I nodded and asked questions, not because I did not understand, but because I wanted Maria to hear the answers too. She sat beside me, listening closely. The clerk looked more at her than at me by the end. That was what I wanted. We did not move any money that day. We did not sign big forms. I was not ready to show any drastic action. This was reconnaissance. I wanted to know the exact shape of what we had and how easily someone like Alex, with my trust and a pen, could move it. As we left, Maria squeezed my arm. She said she had not realized how much there was to know. I told her that knowing was the first step to not being pushed around by other people's plans. A few days after that, I met Samuel in person. We chose the small cafe near the hospital where we had met Alex before. It felt fitting to stand in the same place with a different purpose. Maria came with me, but she sat at a table by the window, giving us space while staying close enough to catch my eye if I needed her. The cafe was half full, the hum of quiet music and cups clinking filling the air. Samuel arrived in a dark coat, carrying a worn leather briefcase. He looked older than when I last saw him, but his eyes were the same, sharp, kind, steady. He shook my hand gently, careful of my grip. He asked how I was, and this time it sounded like he meant me, not my case. I told him the basic story of the coma, the hospital, the slow recovery. Then I told him that while I was lying in that bed, I heard Alex talk about nursing homes and property like we were pieces of furniture. I kept my voice low and even, but the words cut through the space between us. Samuel listened without interrupting. He did not say things like, "I'm sure he didn't mean it that way." He did not excuse Alex's tone as stress. He watched my face, then glanced at Maria by the window, then back at me. He said he had seen many families change when an older person became weak. He said that sometimes children stepped up with love, and sometimes they stepped in with greed. He said his job was to help people put their wishes into clear shapes before someone else wrote over them. I told him that I did not want to fight with my son in court, and that I did not want revenge for pain's sake. I said I wanted one thing above all, to make sure Maria would never be placed somewhere against her will, and that no one could strip her of the home and security we had built. I admitted that I had been too trusting and silent for too long. I said I was ready to act, but I wanted to stay within the law and keep things as simple as possible. Samuel nodded slowly. He took out a small notebook and wrote down a few points. Nothing detailed with names yet, just ideas. He said the first step was to review everything I had already done with him years ago. He mentioned that there were ways to strengthen protections, to make sure that decisions would follow my wishes, even if I became weak again. He also said that speed mattered now, not because we were in danger today, but because plans have to be in place before a crisis, not during it. We did not take out any thick contracts at that table. He did not ask me to sign anything there. Instead, he suggested a longer meeting in his office when I felt strong enough. He said we should bring the main documents, house, pension, accounts. He said we would sit together, go through them line by line, and shape something that fit the life Maria and I wanted, not the one our son decided was convenient. I agreed. As he finished his coffee, he looked at me with that same steady gaze he had the first time we met at that charity event. He said that many people my age felt trapped because they believed they had no tools left. He reminded me that the law was not only for big companies and loud people, it was also for quiet men who had built lives brick by brick and wanted to protect them. His words settled in me like a new kind of strength. When we left the cafe, the sky was gray but clear. The wind cut through my coat, but I stood a little straighter. Maria walked next to me and asked softly what Samuel had said. I told her only the simple version, that we would meet at his office soon, that we would go through our documents, that we would make things clear. She nodded, trusting me as she always had, but this time I promised myself she would not have to trust blindly. That evening, back at home, my phone buzzed on the table. A new email from Samuel had arrived. It contained a date and time for the meeting at his law office, a simple line about bringing our main papers, and a reminder that I should not feel guilty for wanting to protect my own wishes. I stared at the appointment on my screen, at the calm block of time marked with his name. It looked ordinary from the outside, one more event on a calendar. But for me, it was more than that. It was the first fixed point on the path away from being managed by my son and toward setting the terms of my own life again. The morning of the meeting at Samuel's office, the sky was low and heavy, the kind of gray that makes everything look flatter than it is. Maria helped me with my shirt buttons because my fingers still trembled if I rushed. She moved slower now, too, but there was a quiet determination in her hands. We gathered the folders from the metal cabinet, the ones we had already opened together: house, pension, bank. I stacked them in a simple canvas bag, not a briefcase. I did not want to look like a businessman walking into a negotiation. I wanted to walk in as what I was, a husband who had finally opened his eyes. Samuel's office was in an old building downtown with high ceilings and worn stone steps. Maria and I took the elevator. When the doors opened on his floor, I smelled coffee and old paper. The waiting area had simple chairs and a plant that was trying its best to live. A receptionist greeted us with a polite smile and led us to a small conference room. The table was plain wood. There were no fancy decorations, just shelves with thick books and a framed certificate on the wall. It felt serious but not grand, like a workshop for the mind instead of the hands. Samuel came in with a notebook, not a stack of forms. He shook our hands, asked how I was doing, asked how Maria was coping. His questions sounded real, not like lines he said to everyone. Then he sat down and asked me to tell him, in my own words, what I wanted to protect. I did not talk about numbers, I talked about Maria. I said I wanted her to be safe wherever we lived. I said I did not want any situation where she could be moved somewhere or have our home taken from her because someone else thought it was practical. I said I wanted things written in a way that did not depend on my son's conscience. Samuel listened, nodding slowly. He opened the folders one by one, scanned the main documents, and took a few notes. He reminded me of some things we had already put in place years ago, protections I had nearly forgotten. Then he spoke in simple terms about what could be done now that my health scare had revealed how people around me were thinking. He talked about clarity. He said that the law, when used properly, was less about punishment and more about removing confusion so that everyone would know exactly where they stood. He said that if I did nothing, Alex would stand on soft ground that he could reshape as he pleased. If I acted now, I could turn that ground into stone. We did not cover every detail in that first session. It would have been too much for my still tired brain. Samuel suggested we tackle things in stages. That day, we focused on structure, not content. He drew a simple map on a pad, a few boxes and arrows showing where our house, pension, and savings sat now and where they could sit later. He used words like protect, secure, and separate. He did not use words like punish or cut off. That mattered to me. I wanted to reduce Alex's power without turning this into a revenge game. I wanted a boundary, not a war. Maria sat beside me, watching the lines on his pad. I could see her understanding grow. Sometimes she asked a question in her soft, careful voice. Samuel always answered directly, never making her feel foolish. At the end, he summarized everything in plain language. He said he would prepare some documents based on what we agreed in principle. He said we would come back to sign them when we felt ready, and that once they were in place, our future would not hang on anyone else's mood swings or career plans. When we left his office, the sky outside looked just as gray, but the weight in my chest had shifted. It was still heavy, but it had shape now. The next weeks moved in quiet layers. On the surface, life looked almost normal. I went to rehab sessions, slowly relearning balance and strength. Maria cooked simple meals. Alex visited when he could, talking about work and how tiring it was to juggle everything. He assumed that when I checked my phone during his visits, I was bored. He did not guess that I was reading messages from Samuel, lining up times, confirming that pieces were moving into place. Every time he spoke about options for our future, he did not know those options were shrinking by the day. When the day came to sign what Samuel had prepared, it felt less dramatic than I had imagined. There was no glowing light, no echoing music, just the soft scratch of pens on paper and the quiet click of pages being turned. Samuel walked us through each step slowly, making sure we understood what we were agreeing to. He did not rush, even when my hand grew tired. Maria signed where needed, her signature small but firm. I did not look at these papers as weapons. I saw them as doors. Some opened for us, some closed firmly to others. After we left his office, we did not celebrate. Instead, we went to the bank again. This time, we did more than update contact details. We put into action some of the structure Samuel had helped us build. The clerk saw an older couple making careful changes. To them, it probably looked like simple retirement housekeeping. For us, it was rearranging the foundation of our lives. We opened new paths for money to move if needed, and we closed old ones that depended on trust that no longer existed. We asked questions about international transfers, not because we were planning a trip, but because we were beginning to see a life that was not tied to this city, or this country, or this sun. At night, in our bedroom, Maria and I talked in low voices. I told her that I could no longer pretend that Alex would one day wake up and see us as more than responsibilities. She cried a little when I said it. She still loved him in that deep mother way that does not break even when it bends. But she also admitted that she was afraid of him now, afraid of his calm voice and his confident plans. I told her that one day soon we might have to make a choice that would look cruel from the outside, but would be the only kind choice we had left for ourselves. I said that staying where someone felt entitled to manage our lives might be more cruel than leaving quietly. The idea of leaving the country had been a distant dream once. In our younger years, Maria and I talked about spending old age near the sea, somewhere warmer, somewhere cheaper, somewhere where we could walk on a beach instead of up and down the same old streets. We always postponed it. There was work, then Alex's schooling, then Lily's birth. Life stacked reasons like boxes. Now, after the coma, those old dreams came back, not as fantasy, but as a possible answer. We started looking up small coastal towns in countries where our savings would stretch further and healthcare did not cost as much. We read about visas, about rentals, about clinics near the sea. Each article made the idea feel less like a wish and more like a plan. We did not tell Alex any of this. When he visited, we let him talk about his schedule and his stress. I did not argue when he said it would be difficult to handle everything if my condition worsened. I did not correct him when he spoke as if our house would automatically pass to him. I watched him imagine future scenarios where he would decide where Maria slept and how my care would roll into his calendar. I saw that he needed to believe he was the central pillar of everyone's life. That belief was not mine to fix anymore. It was mine to step away from. The day we agreed to schedule the house sale felt both unreal and completely natural. The real estate agent Samuel recommended came to the house, a polite woman with calm eyes and a notebook. She looked over the rooms, measured spaces, took photos. She spoke about market conditions and timelines. She did not know this house held our entire history. She saw square meters and potential buyers. That was fine. My job now was to see beyond those walls, too. Maria walked behind us as the agent moved from room to room. Sometimes she touched a picture frame or a cushion as if saying goodbye. I watched her closely, ready to cancel everything if I saw real panic. But what I saw was sorrow mixed with something else. Relief. The sale moved faster than I expected. We accepted a fair offer from a young couple who looked at our old kitchen as a blank page. There were meetings, signatures, handshakes. Alex knew nothing about it. We timed the last steps for days when he was busy with work and Julia's side projects. Money from the sale did not sit long in old accounts. It followed the paths we had prepared with Samuel and the bank, flowing quietly into places where no one could touch it without our will. Through all of this, I kept my voice steady and my face calm. If anyone looked at me on the street, they would see an older man recovering from illness, not someone rearranging the map under his son's feet. When the house finally stood empty, it felt like standing inside a shell left by a long-gone animal. The echoes were different. The walls looked bigger. The memories hung in the air, then slowly faded as we walked from room to room one last time. Maria stood in the doorway of our old bedroom and said she felt guilty for leaving the place where we had raised our son. I told her gently that we were not leaving him. He had already stepped away from us long ago, the day he started speaking about us as problems to solve. We were only catching up to the reality he had chosen. Our flight out of the country was early in the morning. The airport lights were bright, the announcements too loud. We moved through security without much trouble, just two older people with a few suitcases and a folder of medical papers. No one there knew that our entire life was now compressed into those bags and a few numbers in international accounts. At the departure gate, we sat side by side and watched planes taxi on the wet runway. Maria leaned her head on my shoulder. She asked quietly if I was sure. I told her I would rather take my last years in a small flat by the sea with her than in a big house where our son counted our days like expenses. When the plane lifted off, I felt a strange mix of grief and freedom. Our city shrank beneath us until it was only clusters of light. I thought about bridges again. I had spent my life designing structures that carried people from one side to another. Now I was crossing a kind of bridge I had never drawn, one made of choices and signatures instead of steel. The flight was long, but the landing came all the same. The air in the new place smelled like salt and sun-warmed stone. The apartment we rented was small but bright. White walls, simple furniture, a window that opened to a glimpse of the sea at the end of a narrow street. The sound of waves reached us if we listened carefully. We unpacked slowly. Maria lined up our few photos on a shelf. I placed the important folder with our papers in a plain drawer. Not a metal cabinet this time. I did not need to feel steel under my hand anymore. I needed something else now. Distance. We registered at a local clinic, set up a modest routine, learned how to say basic phrases in the local language. Days began to have a gentle rhythm. Walks, simple meals, exercises, rest. For a short time, if someone had looked only at the outside, they might have said that we had escaped and that the story was over. But I knew that stories like ours never end without a real reckoning. There were still things Alex believed about his future. There were still plans in his mind built on ground that no longer existed. One afternoon, a few weeks after we settled in, I opened my laptop at the small table by the window. An email from Samuel waited at the top of my inbox. He wrote that it was time to have a formal meeting with Alex to explain how things had been arranged, that he would like me to be present by video call so there would be no confusion or accusations later. He gave a date and time and said he expected Alex and Julia to attend in his office. I read the short message twice, feeling my pulse slow instead of race. When the day arrived, I sat in our new apartment, the sea faintly audible outside, and watched the clock count down until the moment would come to click a single button and join the call. Samuel angled the laptop so I could see the conference room. Alex lounged back, expecting control. Julia checked her phone, bored. Samuel began calmly, explaining the medical report confirming my full mental capacity, then laid out the facts. The house sold, proceeds moved abroad, a trust securing Maria's lifetime care, and a modest, conditional stipend for Alex that vanished if he tried to interfere. Alex's face drained as each document slid across the table. He demanded to know how I could do this. I simply said I heard everything. Then I closed the laptop and let his calls ring into the waves.